let me say that in the times of negotiations for peace and freedom of Kosovo, my priority was my nation. How to save my nation, to not anymore have oppression and killings and all what comes with that hardships. But after war ended, I saw the man's affinity to grab all power in post-war Kosovo only because of my geography, my history. They respected me, and whatever positions would be at stake, I would be proposed. But woman is marginalized. That injustice, and in fact, I fight injustice all my life, then I send the injustice vis-a-vis my gender. That is the time when woman issue and gender equality came to my agenda and came to the top.
Welcome to the Lawyering Peace interview series, where we explore the art of diplomacy and the legal frameworks that underpin peace processes. In each episode, we engage with diplomats, lawyers, and peace builders who have played key roles in efforts to resolve conflicts around the world through legal frameworks and dialogue. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Williams, the founder and the president of the Public International Law and Policy Group, and the Rebecca Grazier Professor of Law and International Relations at American University. Today, I am joined by my good friend, Dr. Edita Tahiri. Edita is a distinguished Kosovo-Albanian politician and diplomat, and we first met each other during the Rambouillet peace negotiations. Edita is the former Deputy Prime Minister and an expert in conflict resolution. She is known for her tireless efforts in peacebuilding in the Balkans and her pivotal role in shaping Kosovo's political landscape since the late 1990s. Edita was the key negotiator in the Rambouillet Conference, which sought to resolve the Kosovo conflict in 1999, and her involvement in these critical negotiations has established her as a leading voice for Kosovo on the global stage. Edita served as the Deputy Prime Minister for Foreign Policy and National Security during the negotiations for and eventual declaration of Kosovo's independence in 2008. She subsequently served as the chief negotiator at the Brussels Dialogue between 2011 and 2014, a series of negotiations aimed at normalizing relations between Kosovo and Serbia following Kosovo's independence. In 2014, she was appointed as Minister for Dialogue and Chief Negotiator for the government of Kosovo. Today, Edita continues to advocate for sustainable development, regional cooperation, and women's empowerment. Her strategic vision and dedication to advancing justice and stability make her an influential figure in the ongoing pursuit of peace in the region and globally. Edita, thank you for joining me. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you for having me, and Paul, really, I'm so glad to at least meet online from our great cooperation in the Rambouillet conference. That gave impressive outcome.
Well, now, Edita, over the next hour, we'll delve into your experiences at Rambouillet during the Brussels Dialogue and your ongoing efforts to promote peace and justice. But let's begin with your personal journey. What first inspired you to enter the field of peace negotiations and take part in Kosovo's pursuit of independence?
Well, I also think a lot about this question, but I think that I somehow connected to the destiny of my nation. because when Kosovo got occupied by Serbia, we experienced hard oppression of my people, Albanians of Kosovo, because we did not agree with that occupation, which was in fact that Serbia illegally and forcefully revoked the Kosovo's federal status in former Yugoslavian Federation. By seeing hardships of my people, I simply couldn't stand only as observer, and decided to join the movement for independence, which initially started in Pristina, led by Ibrahim Rugova, the leader. In the same week, I moved citizens of my city in Pristina against occupation and to join the independence movement. And here I found myself in the movement, and soon I got elected in the leadership of the movement, Democratic League of Kosovo. Was the only woman among 15 men of presidency. And this loneliness of woman chased me in the London conference in 1992 for disintegration of Yugoslavia, then Rambouillet conference, and so on.
Edita, let's look a little bit at those early years. You were on the presidency. You were also the Minister of Foreign Affairs from 1991 to 2000 during these very challenging years for Kosovo's struggle for independence. What were some of the key factors that led to your selection for this pivotal role within the independence movement? And what was the significance of taking on such responsibility at this critical time?
Well, I believe that there were several factors that brought me to become first foreign minister of occupied Kosovo. I think that first was my activism by myself, without being invited by myself, growing resistance and mobilize others, which is very important for women when they really want to become actors of change. So first is that. Second was my patriotic background, because I'm the daughter of patriot who was fighting for the rights of Albanians and unification of Kosovo and Albania, and got in prison in the very notorious time of Rankovic, something similar to Milosevic regime. So my father spent 7 years because he fought for the rights of Albanians. Another factor was that I was educated in Western culture, because by graduating in Pristina University for electronics, I then did master in the Essex University. Then after that, my English became even more fluent. So I believe more or less these factors brought me to that role.
Edita, you were highly successful in helping Kosovo navigate through the Rambouillet negotiations, through the negotiations on independence. But can you talk a little bit about the early 1990s, when Kosovo was just beginning to make its case for self-determination, for independence? There was, amid the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, you faced a formidable challenge of convincing the international community with respect to Kosovo's right to independence and the need for global recognition. Can you share with our listeners the obstacles that you encountered in conveying Kosovo's unique circumstances and the uphill battle of persuading diplomats to acknowledge and support Kosovo's struggle for freedom and independence?
Well, first to say that with the leadership of the movement for independence, established diplomacy as a top priority, as a strategic priority, along with our strategy to build independence institutions as peaceful. The diplomacy was the strategic priority of the Kosova's movement for independence. And the reasons that we established as key priority was related that our, say it, national destiny was decided by international community, specifically in the London Conference 1913 and Paris Peace Conference. We Albanians were divided, so Kosovo remained under Yugoslavia together with some Albanian territories. So we were sure that by making the world understand the root causes of Kosovo conflict or Kosovo question and gaining the support of international community, but first of all, gaining support by the United States. So our top priority in diplomacy was lobbying with United States so to build an alliance that we dream, not even believed would come, but it came after some years of our diplomacy. And it was critical for the future. So this was kind of these, I would say, strategies, directions of diplomacy, of course. From US, we would also do lobbying in European countries. And I just to say that my diplomacy strategy up to the Japan. So not only US and Europe, but beyond. Not easy because I was beginner. I had no background, neither political or diplomatic. But I think we individuals, if have some ideals, and especially if they have national ideals in to help their nation that is under threat, like was Albanians, I really focused, though being as a professional engineer, I tried that when I meet diplomats and provide arguments why Kosovo has a right to self-determination and create a state, I based my arguments in the facts. At the time, not easy to make diplomats to listen to me, because first they didn't know much, of Yugoslavia, neither for disintegration, because in the beginning of disintegration of former Yugoslavia that came after the end of Cold War, and when communist empires of Eastern Europe were falling apart, like Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, they were not enough knowledgeable about federal structure of Yugoslavia, and that it had 8 federal parts, among them Kosovo, and that one federal part could not interfere with the constitutional order of the other or occupy like Serbia did to us. So it was very difficult really to make diplomats to understand the root causes, to be convinced that if we say occupation was occupation real and not something like without fact. Not easy in the beginning, but diplomacy is a process. It was interesting for me personally. You open one door, from that meeting, 2 doors are open. Because if a diplomat listens carefully and gets involved in the question you present, then after the meeting tries to help through their connection. This is how my meetings were multiplied. However, I was mentioned, it was very important that first interest and science of Kosovo came from the United States. So even for me to do the diplomacy was easier, because when I would find diplomat not willing to talk, I would immediately say, okay, you may not want to listen, but at least listen that United States is very much showing support, because US sent first Senate delegation in Kosovo in the first year of these hardships, oppressions, and occupation. So it was kind of important, I would say, factor to support my all these efforts to expand the geography of my diplomacy, the levels of meetings from the first level of officials, elevating them to the highest level. This in bilateral terms, but also I started to do diplomacy in multilateral terms, like being in European Parliament and Council of Europe Parliamentary Assembly. Then when oppression was growing and when the tensions rise, and UÇK was created, the Kosovo Liberation Army, I think oppression will reach the levels of really unbelievable tragic developments up to the level of genocide. Then I shifted from political international organizations to security organizations. I shifted to NATO Parliamentary Assembly. In meantime, I already established with the NATO Secretary General Solana, because Solana was foreign minister in Spain. And before that, I was lobbying in Spain and created friendships, and through his classmate, who came to Kosovo as UNESCO delegation to observe closure of schools and university, he put me in touch to Solana. Then I organized the meeting of Rugova, our president, just to illustrate, not to say that in the US, I was every year minimum 4 to 5 times to lobby in Congress and State Department and all other levels. And I was very happy when I was invited 2 years after being foreign minister to visit US in this State Department's international exchange program, which gave me opportunity to talk and have meetings with entire United States official at States Institute, where I lectured, civil society, which helped me to bridge the both countries, America and Kosovo, in terms of understanding cultures of each other, but for us, politicians and leaders, to strengthen the strategic ties with the US. And came in the year 1992, when President George Bush established the policy of known as Christmas warning, when he sent a letter to Milosevic and warned that if escalations against Albanians of Kosovo continues, I will intervene. And that historically is the year of establishing Kosovo-US alliance. So there are more and more. I mentioned London conference in 92. It was a peace conference without not any big outcome for Kosovo, but at least Kosovo was indirectly addressed. Then comes evolution or advancement of United States support after Christmas warning. US will open the office in Kosovo very early 95. Then US President Clinton received Rugova in the meeting in White House, and it was first time when President Clinton said that Kosovo will not be allowed to be repeated as second Bosnia, in a sense of never again. This meeting came after the US wanted Rugova to meet Milosevic to try any peaceful solution. After that came this was the last kind of resort, diplomatic resort. After that, United States moved to mobilize state big or great powers of Europe, creating the contact group led by United States. That contact group shifted the focus to Kosovo's conflict, as Bosnia was already addressed by Dayton Summit. Hence, in 2 years of diplomacy, but on the ground, harsh wars between Kosovo Liberation Army and Serbia's military forces, and with massacres, numberless, killing, expulsions, ethnic cleansing. Finally, the United States and contact group came to the terms to organize the Rambouillet Peace Conference, historic conference. I call it historic because firstly, delegation took a historic decision by accepting the Rambouillet, and coupled with the NATO intervention to stop the war by bombing of Serbia by US and NATO. So this was that journey, very complex. I am happy I could make it in a couple of minutes, and I'm open to we continue through questions.
No, Edita, that's very important because oftentimes when people think about, and in particular our listeners who are young professionals, mid-career professionals, they sort of start from the opening ceremony of the peace process. And as you noted, this took a decade of work by the Kosovar leadership, such as yourself, to bring the United States on board, to bring the European powers on board, to develop a mechanism for effective international advocacy, both diplomatic and then security. Now let's talk a little bit about those days before, right before Rambouillet, in the early days of Rambouillet. How did the Kosovars maintain a cohesive delegation? We've talked in the past about signing some non-negotiable principles before entering. How is the negotiation structured? How do you pull together such an eclectic group of individuals and constituencies to be effective in high stakes, high intensity negotiations in the Rambouillet Chateau?
Yes, first let me say that before the Rambouillet conference, there were peace talks between Kosovo and Serbia, mediated by United States through shuttle diplomas. It was Christopher Hill, mediator, later joined by European Union envoy. But the point is that we negotiated kind of our delegation. LDK, Peaceful Resistance, was in Pristina, and the Liberation Army was in the mountains fighting. So this was that 1 year negotiations, which we could not agree on that. However, it presented some blueprint. And when the Rambouillet Peace Conference started, and the first draft agreement, which was tabled, given to us as delegation, it was that document that we reached 1 year of that negotiations. So it's very interesting, even though it's difficult to find in these studies that the connection between that I call pre-Rambouillet peace process, then formal peace process, Rambouillet Peace Conference. Now about internal dynamics of the delegation, I think not only Kosovo, but in whatever cases there are peace negotiations between warring parties, usually the oppressed party is more faction than the oppressor. We were factioned in two parts, as you know, Paul, yourself as well, LDK and KLA. And first, we were not united before the Rambouillet conference. I tried to unify LDK and KLA even the first days of KLA emerging to the stage, but my mediations failed. This is before Rambouillet. But in my mind and my heart was always that I must first unify delegation, because if we don't unify, we cannot finish this mission. We have to take decisions, and decisions cannot be taken without unity. Of course, as I call myself uninvited, I chair the meeting with goal of unifying with very soft approach, but sometimes also tough. Why I was not the leader of peaceful movement. I was number 3 in peaceful movement, Rugova Agami and me. Anyway, I felt that need that I must do. The reason was that because in the times we were top leaders of LDK in the beginning, the guys of KD were members of LDK. Somehow in some levels we were the real leaders before and now split it. So I made my maximum to melt these frozen relations. Not easy, but very important, big success. And that unification that I mediated, thanks to some colleagues, we were accidentally sitting to each other from KLA and LDK. I immediately after that first part of meeting happened, then I entered to structure the delegation. That I was sure that it's not enough only to say, yes, we are unified. So I proposed decision-making principle like with consensus. Then we built structures, committee, picked the foreign advisors. Among them, you were already in, but we formalized your presence and Weller and Abramovich. To summarize, I said at that room, in the beautiful room, by the way, in the castle, at the computer, wrote the conclusions of that meeting myself without minutes, just convinced. So at all this point I say, signed by me and by the colleague which represented KLA, presented to the mediators, to Americans, it was EU and the Russian mediator, and announced them, we are unified, and these are the authorities to interlocutors, like this presidency of the delegation, and Hashim Thachi became the chair. It was very important to have that. So my message is for always when there is war, when your nation is killed, you must find a way to overcome differences, first within delegation, but also differences around the final approval of that important peace agreement, of course, not compromise principles, but there is always possible to accept peace agreement, peaceful agreement, preserve the principles, still you can bring this nation to the peace times and save them, liberate them.
You need to demonstrate that cohesion among the delegation in order to continue to maintain the international support that you had built up for a decade that had brought you to Rambouillet.
And this is also very important factor. So first was, as you say, to come to unity, to be able to approve, but also preserve the alliance. And I was happy at the time that Americans, and especially Madame Albright, who was very clear when she saw that we were delaying for this. She was very clear that she said, think of your alternatives. You even can lose alliance because all these international, say, dynamics are set up from all important American and European. They capture the moment for the peace. I think it was very helpful to shape our mindsets and final decision. I'm very glad that Serbia failed to sign. Of course, I think that if Serbia would suffer, war would continue, because Serbia was not only occupier of Kosovo, but Serbia launched the wars against Croatia, against Slovenia. So Serbia was in its dream to pursue greater Serbia at the expense of other federal parts that I mentioned. So Milosevic was not for peace. He was for war because he wanted to pursue this project of greater Serbia by expelling other non-Serb people, especially was targeted against us Albanians. And I am also glad that at Rambouillet, international community in this as United States and contact group decided to use force to make peace. Otherwise, with such aggressors, such Milosevic, who even didn't show up in Rambouillet, he stayed in Belgrade and was controlling his delegation, which were not able to negotiate because they were lacking authority. Second, their leader was not ready for peace. So was happy that, international mediators realized finally that only force to support diplomatic efforts and later intervention can bring the peace. I think Rambouillet was in this theory of war, last diplomatic resort before using force for the sake of peace. And it was very good that it happened. Why I say? Because not often in the world do we see such big decisions. And let me mention Poland, because imagine, before Rambouillet conference, UN Security Council adopted 3 resolutions for the Kosovo situation, which was considered as a threat to international peace and security in 3 UN Security Council based on Chapter 7, meaning that after that resolution, UN should even beforehand the peace agreement to use the force to make peace. But UN failed. So I'm glad there was United States to really play a key role to make the peace happen and to end the war and to end genocide. And finally, Kosovo people got free.
And the Americans, the contact group, the Security Council, and the Kosovars themselves did an amazing job setting up, getting to Rambouillet, and then, as you know, forming a cohesive delegation. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of the issues that were negotiated at Rambouillet. The first, external self-determination, independence. I remember the first day when you and I and others were working with Rogova and Faci, that they were going to go and present to Chris Hill, the mediator. Independence was their plan for the peace agreement. And then they came back and they said, okay, we need to come up with some more nuanced approaches to external self-determination. But can you walk us through that story of what happened over the course of the Rambouillet negotiations in the Chateau and then the subsequent Paris negotiations? How did that negotiation of independence play out. Spoiler alert, Kosovo did become independent years later, but this was the very first sort of legal building block of Kosovo's eventual independence. Tell us the story, Edita.
Well, first, just to make it clear that the Rambouillet peace agreement, in fact, provided for independence, but factually, in what terms? It provided self-governance for interim phase. However, there was the provision of referendum in implicit way, but it was in other way, the door open for Kosovo people to exercise their self-determination, namely independence. As you know, how much fights went around it, but it succeeded. And it is important that that provision even reflected not as such, but in the UN resolution 1244 for establishing interim UN administration in Kosovo and NATO protectorate. The point then 10 of that resolution mentions the final status will be facilitated, meaning the door open continued even by legally. As I said, de facto now was even legal, the door was open. So after the war ended and we started our life as free country, of course, we as leadership and politicians in diplomacy urged US and other allies that Kosovo's final status must be defined. Kosovo cannot go in some kind of insecure future, and especially that Serbia meddled in Kosovo in violation of the 1244 resolutions, meddled especially for in northern part of Kosovo, while UNMIK was tolerating and neglecting. It was kind of power politics, which somehow made people of Kosovo even more concerned that if there is delay in independence, then what? So our lobbyings and this international security office in Kosovo established after the Vienna status talks and Ahtisaari. And when Ahtisaari came with proposing independence, again Serbia failed to sign the agreement, like in Rambouillet. So the strategy of Serbia, I think, was and is even today, if possible, never to sign until it maybe comes to the terms of its own dream. So I think that international saw this, allies, and they started to understand our claims for independence. So supervised independence as a stage was completed. Then we entered intensive discussions. I think top figure to talk about the independence even was Hashim Fathi, because he was at the time the prime minister, but also the representative of army wing. Kosovo was not anymore alive, but because I was deputy prime minister and we had also friendships, I was learning from him, but I was also had my channels of communication with State Department, which I still have. Thanks God, Paul, still my friends are there because they were new turbulence. In Kosovo, I hope you remember some dangerous games of border change, etc. Again, I had to activate myself to stop or face such dangerous dynamics. So I think that it was impressive. It delayed, I must say, it delayed 2008 as independence year, but in international relations, we understand there should be some dynamics coming to the terms of real paradigm to push. So that happened and Kosovo became independent in 2008, 17 March.
Edita, let's talk a little bit about the Declaration of Independence. I'm curious for your personal experience. Walk us through what happened on the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed. You're one of the signatories of the Declaration. And how did it feel to be a part of such a pivotal moment in your country's history?
Well, I had two, say, the feelings. First, I felt mission complete. The moment I said mission complete. But that joy didn't last much because immediately came to my mind important leaders from our movement and army, like Rugova was not alive. Secondly, the top leader, Fermi Agani, was killed by Serbian military forces during the war with one bullet. He was killed. Then it was not the leader of Kele, Adem Yashari. So didn't last much my happiness. My brain was somehow happy, but sad, and then somehow the history pages were quickly circling in my mind.
Now, after Kosovo's Declaration of Independence and recognition by over 100 countries around the globe, you headed up the 2011 Brussels Dialogue, which was aimed to normalize the relations between Kosovo and Serbia. Kosovo had declared independence, had been recognized by many members of the international community, most of the members of the EU, the United States. Serbia was still reluctant to treat it in a proper and mature way. And as the chief negotiator, can you walk us through the role that you played in these negotiations and some insights into the negotiation process?
Well, of course, as individual or politician, I was considering that it was too much of negotiations with Serbia. As I mentioned, from London Conference 92, Rambouillet, then comes Vienna status talks that I was not part of delegation because I was doing my master's studies at Harvard University at that time. Then immediately I was proposed to become again negotiator with Serbia. So somehow individually was fed up of these negotiations. However, I was asked by US government to accept the role. I rejected. Prime Minister was Hashim Thaçi. I was deputy prime minister. I said, no, for me enough. I don't know if as peacemaker or peacebuilder, I should say enough, but trust me, yes, sometimes becomes enough. Do this for your studies, but I'm very honest. I said enough. However, US government asked me to accept this role. The reason, because of my experience in all these important peace processes, and because of my historic profile in the independence movement. Then I said, I have some red lines for acceptance. Immediately, Paul, and they asked which one. I said, no more status talks with Serbia. Kosovo is independent. It's closed issue. Second, I said, for Serb minority, no more than what Ahtisaari plans provided for Serbs, because quite advanced rights given to Serbian minority along with independence. So this was the big compromise of the Ahtisaari plan. And I said, third is that you Americans should be in the table. I said, I don't trust Europeans. If it would be left to you, EU and UN, I said, war will be still around in Bosnia and more. And these talks were in the American embassy. It was Christopher tell ambassador. He said, let me talk immediately to government. It was the timing good, like now, working hours. He told them about my red line. They said, yes, we accept. Tell her in the morning to fly to Washington. And in the next morning, so I arrived to Washington, and you know whom I met? William Burns. At the time, he was deputy of Hillary. She was Secretary of State. Now he's CIA chief. When I entered the meeting at State Department with him, his first thing he said, your 3 red lines, we are okay. I liked his way of confirming. I said, then I am okay as well. And really, from the day one, I would say was 8 March 2011, US representative was at the table. At one table was EU mediator, at the other. At the time, first was Tom Countryman, for many times then others, but technical dialogue was one side EU, on the other side Americans and both delegations. After the dialogue on this is technical dialogue, then started dialogue on normalization of relations. And it started at political levels. I was chief negotiator for implementation, what was reached in the political dialogue. So just to know how the process developed. However, Americans would be always in the building of the European Union, but not seated anymore. I am sure Serbia didn't allow to have Americans in this normalization platform of dialogue. Anyway, it was very important to have Americans for the first start, let's say for 2 years. Why? Because I had experience of negotiating with the Serbian delegation, but not with Europeans. So my message for those who want to learn from experiences, I think is very important in negotiations to mind what is vital interest, hidden interest of the other side. And to be able to work on impartiality of mediator, but also to educate mediator which topics leads to peace and which topics may lead to war. I did that poll because in the first day Serbia never mentioned, but in the corridors of European Union was whispering about no, not to me, but you know, these spots of cigarette, these advisors, each other, and would not say the North, but would say to our, you need the ticket if you want we to recognize you. This kind of rumors, very important. Then my advisor briefing me, I said, don't tell me what you heard, but learn what is this ticket. Anyway, they unpacked this ticket issue. They told it's no. When I learned this, so we just reached 4 or 5 agreements in the first stage. It is freedom of movement, free trade. Then first agreement that most successful was border between Kosovo and Serbia with this IBM border integrated management. This was first agreement, the first big success that I consider in this dialogue. Not only border crosses functional, our authorities got back to border crossings because Serbia burned that border crossings after the declaration of independence. And also in the peace agreement, Paul, I succeeded to come to the formulation both parties recognize each other's jurisdiction. De facto, mutually recognizing each other. It is there, and I never, when regretted and wanted to change and moderate, I never let that change. And if other agreements that would try to make drawback, I would say, no, we reached this. We have to go on and forward. So it's very important for negotiators, if principles are reached, to push forward, because always one side or the other wants to bring them back. I didn't allow Paul, but also didn't allow ever topic of territory or nor to be discussed in the table. How? I spoke to mediator Robert Cooper, invited him for a lunch. I said it should be long meeting. Told him, quote, the norm mean if topics come, and I said that not it can come, it will be rejected by me categorically. But you think, do you want from these negotiations to be peaceful mediator? Or do you want to end up mediator of new war in the Balkans? Because I told him that you cannot change borders only in one part of Balkans. If you start in one part, they go like domino effect.
Edita, let's now turn to a question that I know is near and dear to your heart and that you've been working on since the first day I met you over 30 years ago. And that's gender inclusion in peace negotiations. You've long been a champion of the importance of gender inclusion in peace negotiations. And you've played the role as a key negotiator in Rambouillet and as the chief negotiator for the Brussels Agreement. Talk to us a little bit about your experience and about what strategies you recommend for our listeners, our young professionals and our mid-career professionals.
Yes, thank you. First, let me say that in the times of negotiations for peace and freedom of Kosovo, my priority was my nation. Top priority. How to come to terms to save my nation, to not anymore have oppression and killings and all what comes with that hardships. So, in the Rambouillet conference, I even not focused to try or ask for any provisions for a gender inclusive approach, because my nation was first, the destiny. But after war ended, I saw the man-said affinity to grab all power in post-war Kosovo. Only me was the one inevitable because of my geography, my history. They respected me, and whatever positions would be at stake, I would be proposed. But woman is marginalized. That injustice, and in fact, I fight injustice all my life, then I send the injustice vis-a-vis my gender. That is the time when woman issue and gender equality came to my agenda and came to the top. That is how I started immediately first elections in Kosovo. I, of course, was successful to adopt quota for parliament. Thanks to my leadership, I created grand coalition with women of civil society, and we established quota, 30%, which lasts and even is coming almost to 40%. First is this. Second, then I thought the region is so devastated, so much pain, so much unhealed wounds of war. So I was thinking how to make networking. And in talks with UNDP represented in Kosovo, this discussion, she came up, she was Jewish by origin, she came up with this model of Palestinian Israeli woman, so-called Jerusalem link principle, which implies mutual recognition of self-determination of each other, but work together. I told her it's a good idea, but I don't think so. I'm ready to enter directly only with Serbia's woman, but I am proposing regional approach. Anyway, there was many wars, not only Kosovo, Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia. And this is how she and me, and some other women initiated creation of the regional women's lobby, which brings in women top leaders of war types, of politics and civil society from 7 countries. Not easy to decide to work together. First meeting was more of splits than any common ground. However, in the process, today, almost 20 years, we are really, I would say, very important regional player of women in the region. And they asked me to become the chairperson. Again, refer to my background experience in peace negotiations, in leadership of the movement. So since then, I am quite active, quite focused, working for peace building in the Balkans. And I believe that woman power for peace is important and specific, and it is undermined, unfortunately, because I think I don't differentiate much genders, but for peace, I find in women unleashed potentials. They are being more and more recognized. Anyway, we do our share and we tackle important issues that make progress in peace building. And given that Balkan is still kind of unfinished peace, and we live in fragile peace where rapid, disruptions, we lose achievements, they go back. So we women try to raise our voice, put finger on the concerns, and of course, lobby for gender equality to come to the terms of real gender equality, not only in numbers, but also in political power. Because today's reality of gender equality that we, in different international forums, of course, praise the progress. However, I have big concern that in reality, progress is not that big because political power is with men. They are top leaders in decision making. And when woman takes a role but appointed by the men political leader, then men controls woman's actorship in whatever state responsibilities. And I think I'm putting finger and lobby that we must have new strategy, and even the documents we have, like 1325, the UN Security Council, and other basic platforms and others, we must speak in concrete terms. I am lobbying for 1325 plus. What is this? That this resolution, which recognizes the woman's role in conflict resolution, in peace building, calls for women in decision making levels and leadership, but I want that this plus new resolution to call on political power for women or gender equality in political power between women and men, or in others, men to be ready to share power with women. Because what we see, men are ready to share power in parliament, but when it comes to government, no. So I think this is a gap. And as we all know, we don't see women in the formal peace processes. Kosovo had me for many years in Brussels. Now is only men. Kosovo, men chief, Serbia, men chief negotiator. So it's another gap that we as lobby work to fill that gap with advocacy conferences and presenting our vision and role or voice in international summits for this issue.
Well, Edita, you've done amazing work yourself as a chief negotiator and trying to promote greater inclusivity. What is it that needs to change in order for there to be a greater acceptance of women in peace processes?
If you allow me first, I will explain something else that relates not directly to your question. Balkans, both by international players, is seen as part of peaceful Europe. So our work, our peace negotiations and existence of women in this peace negotiator, or myself, because I am the only woman in the Balkans. And if I would be more, maybe they would not overlook us. So imagine, Paul, so many studies and books are done for the world and women negotiated. Balkan is not there, and I am not there. Finally, at one conference I happened to be and was speaking in these terms. And I was invited in New York also in another panel with Director of UN Women from Zile was before. And what I told you now, I discussed this. I said, we not only have gone through wars and genocide, but Balkans are overlooked. We are not in the studies. We are not even invited to speak, to share experiences. It was breakthrough, Paul. And I said, here myself, only woman, in Kosovo delegation, Rambouillet, and other conferences, in the Balkans. No one looks at us. I said, I understand other parts are also in trouble, just Africa, Asia, but Balkan, Paul, unfortunately, same war, same cruelty. No, through lenses, you are part of peaceful continent. This I share just you to understand, because I'm sure that telling you, you will be able to share such a big consent. Isn't it that it is a concern? We lobby, for example, exist as a regional organization with all these women who were playing role in war and peacetime, and like myself, chief negotiator or peace negotiator, forgotten, overshadowed, etc. Now to your question.
You, in a sense, you've answered it. What needs to change in order to have more gender inclusivity in peace processes?
Of course, to be able to have women in peace negotiations in formal peace processes, women must be in decision-making levels with political power. In other terms, we must empower women in politics so they take their seats in leaderships of political parties, because their decision comes who is taking the roles. So without having women politically empowered, we will wait long to see women in negotiating tables because, as I said, when it comes to power, man still is very eager to keep the power and take bigger roles for men. So I think political empowerment is the only way to bring women to top leaderships, hence to also decide the peace in the tables. To add something more, Paul, I lately wrote a paper for expert group for Beijing 30 because I was in the Beijing conference in 1995. But I lobbied on Kosovo, not on women, as you understood. Anyway, helped me to internationalize Kosovo question. And in my writing that I did for this expert group, I called that a woman can be in peace processes only if it is politically empowered and can be in leadership. And I said, I think time has come to test man leadership. Given the world is less peaceful, less secure, and the leadership is man, time is to try woman leadership.
That's a very strong recommendation, Edita. Let me pick up on something you talked about, the unfinished peace with Serbia. Can you tell us a little bit about where things stand now and how you anticipate the next couple of years will play out in the relationship between Kosovo and Serbia?
Well, Paul, good question. And Kosovo, Serbia, normalized neighborly relations is crucial for the peace and stability in the region and beyond. However, that normalization comes through big exchange that we are now. We are at the final stage, and this big compromise, which is left undone from the Ahtisaari plan, is association for Kosovo and the recognition of independence of Kosovo by Serbia, because association derives from Ahtisaari plan. There is given to Serb minority. Ahtisaari included in plan, but Ahtisaari is one who said that Kosovo should be independent. However, Serbia wants to pick Ahtisaari from that plan, but not the recognition. And Brussels dialogue was continuation of closing the issues remained from Ahtisaari plan. When I say association, Kosovo really must implement, but based on Kosovo constitution and without competencies, the one we did in the Brussels in 2015. However, Serbia is not moving to recognition, and I don't expect that Serbia will move for recognition, especially with this new geopolitical troubles or dynamics in the world and Russia aggression to Ukraine, and Serbia openly siding with Russia, and even EU just observes nothing in terms of criticize or any punishment. So I believe that Serbia knows, and Serbia is told by main European players, such as Germany, first of all, and others. But first is Germany, who told Serbia that you cannot become EU member without recognition of Kosovo. When I was chief negotiator, I was doing diplomacy, and when this normalization agreement was reached by Hashim Thaçi with counterpart of Serbia, and the title Road to Normalization or Governing the Normalization Relations, in my diplomacy, I visited capitals like Berlin, like Paris and others. In Berlin, I found the answer. I said, first, do you somehow define normalization? What is for you normalization? I know, and I came to tell you what is for me, but for you. And they laugh like you. It was Emily Haber, permanent secretary at the time in foreign ministry. Then she went the ambassador of Germany for some years in United States. Emily, very strong figure, Emily Haber. And she laughed like you. I said, okay, then tell me, what did I do? What do you think? I said, recognition of Kosovo, Kosovo association. What remained, I said to her, undone by Atisar Plan or Vienna talks. Very shortly, as I did also my diplomacy in that 10 years, Paul, I was very articulated, short. So to be able to insert my message and change the minds. Okay, she said to my ambassador, who was Kosovo ambassador with me, he said, can you leave the meeting? I want to talk in 4 eyes with Edita. He left ambassador hour. She said, I'm telling, and please don't share. Now, sometime we agree when you share, but for now, no. Yes, we Germany told Serbia, when you won't come to the doors of EU, you will not get in. So Serbia knows. And she saw my face. She said, but you are not happy, Edita. I told you. I said, no, it's one more element. I said, what? Another element is Serbia can come. Veto can stop Kosovo. Another element is, yes, independence recognition, acceptance in EU, and the provision that disable Serbia's veto for Kosovo. She said, don't worry, we told that. And it is in our platform. Then after that, I started to go to other capitals. But unfortunately, Paul, except United States, others don't mention this recognition for association. Because I thought, even to our prime minister, not directly, but by my media interviews, I say, association for recognition. Easy. Harvard School of Short Definitions. But no one, only Biden, President Biden, when he wrote the letter to Kosovo and Serbia in these last 2 years dialogue, he named directly, he said, US supports this dialogue to end up with mutual recognition. But no one else is mentioned. Okay, I close here. And I think you got my answer that it will last until Serbia comes to the doors of EU, but I don't expect early.
When they come to the doors of the EU, then they'll be forced to do mutual
absolutely.
with Kosovo.
And that's why Serbia, in which it plays, I will never recognize, because he knows there are many years until he arrives to the door. But this doesn't mean things to progress, but Kosovo cannot accept now, cannot implement association. Because if it is the last card of this long journey of negotiations, Kosovo, there is no more cards. Kosovo has no more else to give.
And so trading that association for Serbian municipalities.
For recognition. And I even wrote a piece of paper, and also to make aware our Prime Minister Association for recognition.
Has to be that quid pro quo. Well, Edita, you've been very generous with your time. I have one last question, and that is, given your experience over these last 30 years, what is your one key takeaway for our listeners who are young professionals and mid-career professionals who are looking to build durable peace, looking to engage in peace negotiations like yourself? What is the one thing that they should remember in the coming years from this conversation?
Well, I think that peace negotiations have no alternative, first. And after war, comes peace, and should come peace, and everybody should contribute to that.
So an inclusive peace in order to make it a durable peace. Edita, it's been a real honor and a privilege to spend this time with you today, talking through your experience as the foreign minister at Rambouillet, at Brussels, and promoting gender empowerment and gender inclusivity. It's been an honor and a privilege to know you for almost 30 years and to have worked closely with you over the years. So thank you very much.
Same here, Paul, and thanks once again so much for your so substantial contribution and advices to make us be more successful in the Rambouillet peace agreement, and which resulted to the freedom. So thank you for your contribution for freedom and independence of Kosovo.
Thank you, Edita. I really appreciate that.